You're watching the Strategic Motivator Show with special guest, Jewel Love. Watching on YouTube? Make sure to like and subscribe.
Hey y'all, it's April Franks, and I am here on the Strategic Motivator Show. And listen, if you're here and you're seeing me, you should be on it too. Why? Because Robin is bringing the heat with some amazing guests that's going to help you elevate your game, whether you are building your business, you're in entrepreneurship, you're moving up the ladder in leadership. This is where you want to be for all the nuggets.
Welcome to the Strategic Motivator Show. My name is Bryson Talmadge, and I am the Strategic Motivator. This show is for leaders who would like to make an impact and revenue in their business, career, and life. We motivate leaders to be more strategic because we care about your success as a complete leader and not just a one-dimensional leader. So today we are going to talk about something that has to do with your life. Leaders are always talking about business, but one of the things that they rarely talk about is their emotional health. Even though they may talk about emotional intelligence, emotional health is a little bit different. And today we are going to be joined by a professional in this field, licensed psychotherapist, Jewel Love. Jewel Love is the CEO of Black Executive Men and champions mental health. He is an awesome psychotherapist who has worked with the likes of Google and Microsoft and really worked with leaders for the last 5 years. Welcome to the show, Jewel.
Thank you, Robin. I'm so glad to be here. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Well, I love your background. I think it's very important and very much a needed skill in today's workforce. But before we dive into that, can you tell me a little bit about you? Where'd you grow up? How'd you get into this field?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from Oakland, California, in the larger San Francisco Bay Area. It surrounds Oakland. So it's a very diverse kind of melting pot of people that come from all over the world and call this their home. And that's actually where I'm at here today. Although I've traveled all over the world, studying different cultures and religious backgrounds, really have always had an inquisitive mind for different cultures and ways of doing things. So, maybe like the viewers out there, and maybe like yourself, I was not familiar with psychotherapy until I became an adult. And it was really on this journey of spiritual growth and personal development when I came across some different psychological teachings, and I found them to be absolutely profound. They were a doorway into the conversation we're going to have here today, which is really around emotional management, emotional literacy, emotional mastery. And I found that by studying that, I was able to improve my relationships, but firstly with myself, of figuring out, well, how do I feel on the inside? Maybe it's just as a man or just in our society. I never really got the education on how to identify the tens, if not hundreds of different feelings I have inside. And it provided me with so much information about myself in relationship to new concepts, ideas in the world. So from there, discovered that, got my master's in clinical psychology, and started up a private practice. And in that private practice, men of color and Black men specifically started to seek me out for services. So I'm mixed with Scottish Canadian and African American. So this African American experience is something that I know of and I'm very familiar with. And so we could bond and connect on that level, as well as I'm very business minded. So we can connect on that level as well. And that's really how Black Executive Men was born, was out of a niche and a need in the market. And the good thing, though, is that these skills that we're here to talk about are totally transferable to any person, really any age demographic, racial, ethnic background, or gender. So I'm happy to get into it.
Yes, I'm super excited. And just for our audience to know, not only will you get the benefit of hearing me interview Jewel Love today, but also we have a masterclass that he's done just for our group. And if you are interested in that, please look up at strategicmotivator.com and you can sign up so that you can be part of the masterclass with Jewel. So Jewel, you talked a little bit about emotional management, and I have just recently heard the term emotional labor. And I don't know why, but it kind of shocked me, right? Because we talk about our jobs and we talk about being leaders, but also that a lot of the times we don't think about jobs, having a bit of the labor that we do is emotional labor. And some jobs are inherent in that, right? People who have to tell people no on their jobs for certain things, people who have to actually tell people that their health is not well or that their health benefits will not help them. And sometimes that's hard for us to be able to balance that. So when I thought about that, and also I thought about what you talk about with emotional management, it made me realize that many of us are not even cognizant that we are having these emotional moments while we are working. So when people finally get to you, obviously they realize that there's a need. But how many people do you think are actually unaware of the emotional component to work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people are aware of it, but on surface levels. There's a lot of talk around people being stressed at work or tired at work or even unsatisfied with their jobs. And that's going to kind of change really depending on the generation and the boomers versus the millennials, for example, and how important job satisfaction is versus just making money and paying the bills type of thing. But what we're noticing, and I'd say especially with a lot more of the millennial generation, is they actually have, I'd say, probably about 30 or 40% about awareness of what's going on. But it's really when they get into psychotherapy is when it really gets deep into the intricacies, where they can get 80, 90, 100% aware of how they're feeling and relating to any given circumstance. I'd say probably for Gen X, boomers will take it there as well. It's going to be maybe a little bit less possibly around awareness, because there's just a lot more talk around emotional literacy today than there was, I don't know, we'll say 50 years ago. So there's that cultural shift. But the beauty in it that I find with clients is when we go into emotions, it really gets them clear on, hey, is this job going to be the right fit for you? So this is deeply pivotal stuff, things that could actually end up saving clients a lot of money and a tremendous amount of time and suffering. I have clients that are in jobs right now that no matter how they spin, no matter what they do, the environment itself does not promote an optimal state for them emotionally to be in. And no matter what they do in that setting, it's not going to work. So the work that we end up doing is identifying what kind of work environment would be best for you. Maybe a manager that supports you, a good amount of leadership and development training, a place that has a sense of purpose to it, an environment that pays you well, stock options that really meet your needs. Maybe the commute is a lot less than what you're currently doing, or you want to do more remote days than working at the office. So within a couple of sessions, I help clients identify exactly the kind of work environment that they want to be in that can help them flourish emotionally. That has to do with the setting, not just the mindset. And then we have them move toward it. And once they've achieved it, you see all new kinds of ease and joy and a hopping out of bed in the morning, getting dressed, going to work, rather than a dreading that whole process. So that is all tied back to people going within and saying, this is how I truly feel. And that's a skill set, and that's an insight, and that's an awareness. And through accountability processes, and skill set building, that's what I help clients do.
That is awesome and tremendous. And especially if you can do that early with the people in their career, right? Because, you know, a lot of times people are just going through the motions or they're conforming. So when you talked about that, it made me think we definitely want to catch people early. And you've done some work with Google and Microsoft. Now, in those spaces, are not only you teaching that to their community or their workforce, how are you changing, or at least what is the conversation around hiring, making sure that we do ask the right questions to make sure that people are a good fit and that they are going to enjoy their job? So that, because there's a cost to bringing somebody in, to onboarding them, and then finding out that they're not great for the job. So does the conversation go both ways, have you found?
You know, that's a really good question. Much of the work that I do, it's really around this like organizational change and culture change, culture shift. And what we're seeing, both related to retention, but also recruitment, is there's this shift to actually humanizing the workplace. We see a change from human resources to people management or people experience officers.
Yes, I've definitely seen that.
Yeah, and that's so exciting.
It's
It's like, it's the buzz right now. And it's actually really exciting because companies are exploring more ways for their employees to bring their whole self to work. Now, this doesn't mean showing up in footies or sweats or, you know, nothing like that. But just how they can bring more of their authentic, a sense of personality and their gifts and their insights to the workplace, especially as it continues to diversify and diversify and diversify. And one of these elements in diversification are really welcoming these different feeling states into the workplace and people sharing a little bit more of their inner self with their colleagues and having appropriate language in which to do so. So what comes to mind is, although my programs focus mainly on current employees and deal oftentimes with retention, in the recruiting process, they're sharing this information that we have these services available. And so that's going to be attractive to certain recruits that are looking for an environment. And I'm telling you, they do. When I'm in session with clients, these are the things that they're looking for. They don't want a stale work environment. Many don't anymore. They want something a little bit more interactive and engaging. So I think that's probably in the conversation. I can definitely say it can be a selling point for people who are doing recruiting to, you know, convince or help persuade someone to come work for their company. But simultaneously, it's what employees are looking for in the next company, especially if they're working in tech, because there's just so many opportunities available.
So you're telling me that tech is not just this heads down, coding, startup, busy, playing foosball type of environment. There's actually some emotions.
Foosball. That's the thing. They're trying to create atmospheres for people to bring more of who they are, their fun side, maybe their a little bit more playful side. But this is a new piece that's coming in as well. Yeah, so that's exactly what I'm saying, is that even places, and maybe especially places like tech, because they can be the most agile. They're getting hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in startup and seed capital pouring in, and you got these 20-somethings, maybe some 30s and 30-somethings that are pouring in. They're coming from Washington. They're coming from all over the United States and some from outside of the United States. And they're trying to find these optimal work environments. And that's what these younger people are wanting. Now, I think when we talk about just engineers who are very much, head down, coderish, oftentimes, that may be one thing, but there's a lot of other personnel. You've got admin, you've got HR, you've got recruiting, you've got sales. And so all of that together, plus engineering, they're interested in looking for and many times need these skill sets.
All right. Well, a couple of more questions, and this is kind of a 2-in-1. So it is really good to understand and know that you are being brought in to help these folks. But I'd like to ask you, how often, one, do people seek you out? And then do you have kind of a success story that you can share? And the reason why I'm asking this is because I think there are sometimes people who hear the word psychotherapist or psychotherapy or licensed counselor, and they just really are kind of like, and I will just say, we're both African American. That community is sometimes reticent, maybe not to go, because I have a lot of professional friends who really do go and consider that helping them a complete leader, but they don't want to necessarily talk about it. So can you share, how you kind of make that, help them to be able to reach out, and then maybe share a success story of how maybe this has helped someone get ahead and move forward as a leader?
Absolutely. So my company is called Black Executive Men. Mind you, these are skill sets that are transferable to anyone, any gender, any background, any age group. So you're more than welcome to give me a call, even though it's called Black Executive Men. Open and working with all clients. Skills are transferable. So with that said, a couple of things come to mind. One is the stigma in the African American, in the Black community around that. And then there's how I deal with that, and then a success story. But I'll start with the success story. So I had a client who came in, middle management, and really suffering, suffering. Just like, oh my gosh, it doesn't have to be this way. And I knew it didn't. But the mentality that they came in with, and they're kind of, even though very sharp, very strong mind to be able to move up the ranks, there were still some issues and concerns around self-esteem. And you'd be surprised that those things can actually go together. Concerns around self-esteem, but being able to move up the ranks. There's one thing about just being able to get the job done, and then there's something else to be said about really feeling good about oneself, and that's more about inner work. So there was some inner work to be done, and we did that work over the period of a short while, and they moved from a job where they felt really, I'd say, put down upon, not listened to, not heard. It goes even a little bit further than that. It was a toxic workplace. Even though the pay was it wasn't the right fit for them. So we did some work. They bounced over, found another job that was a better fit. They went through a process of identifying exactly what type of environment they wanted to work in. That in of itself was real exercise for their mind, but in the realm of self-esteem, and not what's going to be good for the business, but what's going to be good for them in their life. And so it was a new way of thinking for them. It didn't work out well. And doesn't that
ultimately, and I want to ask, just stop you a little bit there, when it is ultimately good for you, isn't it also ultimately good for the business? Absolutely.
Totally. So this person then bounced over to first job. It was a better fit, not the best fit. So it doesn't always happen on the first time. And then kept moving, and found a place that's wonderful for them now. They want to stay there. They love it. The people love the person. They're moving up rapidly. Pay is increasing, and their mental health is increasing overall as well. So definitely, I would say, yes, if it's good for them, it's going to be good for the business, and vice versa. Talking about that question around stigma. So my business, there's two. One's called Black Executive Men. That says nothing about therapy.
That's true. Yeah, that's
right. On purpose.
Okay.
Right? It's not called Black men whose mothers were alcoholics and now they have difficulty expressing their feelings due to childhood trauma.com. Not the name of my business. Dudes don't want that. I don't know who does. So it's kind of like a sell the sizzle, not the steak. So the sizzle is, this is what my clients want. They want to be an executive. They want to be seen, or they want to be a leader, or both. So that's what I sell, and it makes it easy for them to relate because it's an identity that they already have subconsciously. and it's an aspiration. So that gets them in the door. Once they're here, we're going to do the firm accountability, the emotional literacy, healthy mindset shifts that can actually help them to get to that goal. As far as my work with Champions goes in Google and Microsoft and works with the employee resource groups there, and specifically focusing on the Black community or African American community. As you know, and talked about a bit, the stigma, that's a real thing. So what I do is really around culture change in the Black community. When I go in, I use words around therapy. I talk about depression. I talk about anxiety. I talk about imposter syndrome. I talk about the feeling of being the only. And being the only doesn't just relate to Black people. It can relate to any person, but it's definitely something my clients gender, absolutely,
yes,
feel a lot of. So these are ways that get them to use the language of clinical psychology and psychotherapy and actually shift the Black community. So over time, people talk about feeling depressed, feeling anxious, feeling sensitive, feeling vulnerable. And that's a newer slice of culture that's being woven in to the Black community in these larger corporate settings. And it's something that's happening in corporate culture anyway, is the introduction of mental health. Last short thing I'll say about that is not just in the Black community is there stigma, but there's a lot of stigma in a lot of communities around mental health. One being the corporate community. There's so many people in corporate America who don't want anyone to know, no matter their race or gender, that they're not doing so well because they're worried about it affecting the
perception. And yes, absolutely.
You got
I think it's a lot of that is because as a leader in corporate America, or just in the executive realm, or just as even a supervisor, you know, there are a lot of new supervisors who come on board. They were these great technical experts. And then all of a sudden they have to lead people, and it's new to them and it's hard to them, but they don't want to tell anybody they're having trouble. They don't want to tell anybody it's hard. And that is why we're here. That's why the Strategic Motivator Show exists. We want to help those leaders who really need to increase their competencies. You know, when you get hired for a job, you don't want to go in and tell them straight away you're incompetent in a certain area. But guess what?
No. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Exactly. But we're here
Tell me. Come tell me. We'll help you improve it.
Exactly. And that's why I brought you in, because mental health is one of those competencies that people really do need to make sure that they're balanced, you know, make sure their mindset is good. You know, you're in meetings 24/7, but you've still got 1,000 things to do at the end of the day. So you're working 12, 14 hours, right? And mental health could be the last thing you think about when you go home and you're exhausted, right? And then you've got somebody who's a subordinate saying, you didn't treat me well. And then you've got a boss saying, you didn't deliver. So it's really tough. And so we're here just to really help people focus in on those things, because when people take these jobs, they don't just want to be leaders. They don't want to just be managers or supervisors. They want to be great leaders. And so that's what we're here today. So thank you so much for coming. But before you go, there's a couple of things. One, I want to make sure that everybody has your information. So how would we find you?
Absolutely. Please, you know, any person, any gender, racial background, it's okay. Contact me. My website is www.blackexecutivemen.com. I'll say it again, www.blackexecutivemen.com. It's spelled exactly like it sounds, and there's a consultation button. Go ahead and click that consultation button, and I want to give you a special code. It's strategic. It's strategic. Normally, it's a 15-minute consultation process, but if you go ahead, put in strategic, because you're a special listener of this show, we'll go ahead and extend that to a 30-minute mastermind session just for you. Go ahead and reach out.
All right. So here is our last thing, and this is something that is just for a strategic motivator. We're going to do what's called a strategic speed round. Are you ready?
Do it.
Okay. Okay. So let me tell you how it goes. I'm going to say a common phrase, and you're going to tell me if you, one, either know a strategy around that, or if that is a good strategy. Okay? So the first one, fake it till you make it. Is that a good strategy for leaders? And again, this is
fake
okay,
it,
good.
Fake it till you make it, and immediately pick up the phone and call a therapist or a coach or a mentor that can actually give you the skill set required to authentically make it.
Absolutely. Okay, great answer. Great answer. And we ask leaders these things all the time. So there's always a bunch of different answers. So it's really great to hear your perspective. So here's the other one. Fight or flight. Are either of those right? So as a strategy, fight or flight. Are either of those right?
Okay. You're fighting or flighting because of a threat. So what I would suggest, going back to the 3 keys for emotional management. Number 1, identify how you're feeling, because it's trying to make you run or fight. Identify how you're feeling inside about it. Are you scared? Are you upset? Do you feel frozen? Number 1. Number 2, regulate. Okay. Be it take a deep breath, or 2, so you don't feel the urgency to flight or fight. Breathe. Number 3 is communicate. Stand there where you are and communicate how you're being impacted on whatever's being said to you or whatever policy is coming down, so that you're in clear communication and relationship with the policy or subordinates or managers or colleagues. That can help people see you as a leader and be very clear about where you stand in a way that can bring you together versus tearing you apart, which is what sometimes fighting or flight can do.
All right, one more. This is our last speed round question. Emotional literacy or emotional intelligence, are these necessary for leaders? And I say that because, is it true that sometimes we hear people on the news, right, who obviously don't have emotional intelligence or emotional literacy, who are executives, who are the CEO of the company? So unfortunately, when we do hear about the fact that they don't have these skills, it's a blunder that they may have made. So tell us, emotional literacy or emotional intelligence, are these necessary traits for every leader?
You know, the thing about psychotherapy, I would say yes and no. The thing about psychotherapy, and to keep it brief, is that each person is different. So when they come into the session, it's not my job to tell them the type of person that they need to be in order to be a leader. I look at what would benefit them and what may be missing for them in their leadership style. And for many of my clients, they've tried the other way and it didn't work. So they're looking for something new. Emotional literacy, being able to identify how they're feeling and how others are feeling and being able to relate. And emotional intelligence is knowing how to really manage and maneuver with different emotions for success and how to employ them using empathy and sympathy to connect with clients, colleagues, etc., for optimal outcomes. So 2 slightly different things. But I think both incredibly effective, especially as we move toward a more AI type world where soft skills are going to be very valuable for human beings to be utilized and staying valuable in the workplace.
Well, Jewel, I can't tell you how wonderful it has been to have you on our show. I am super excited that you came today. So thank you again. And for those of you who are watching, don't forget to go to the strategicmotivator.com. That's spelled strategic, MOTV8R.com. And that is going to give you access, one, to this interview. And then after you get access to this interview, you'll be able to get all of his information to contact him. And not only that, we have leaders such as Jewel, but we also have leaders that are going to be coming up, and we will have master classes from each of these leaders. It's going to be in our membership portal, so you definitely want to be a member. Not only that, we're going to have coaching that goes with that. Jewel is actually going to be one of our members, and he will be part of our team. He will be part of this information. So you'll be able to connect with him and other leaders like him, and we will all be able to grow our emotional literacy and the rest of our leadership competencies together. So again, Jewel, thank you so much for being a part of the Strategic Motivator Show. And we hope to see all of you and have better conversations in the future. Thank you.